were doing better, and those that are having higher education that was protected from structure and economic exclusion. And then tying into our conversation today was I tried to look at what are some of those strategies that people are using to cope. And so what I have is a list in order of what was the most utilized. So active coping, I'm happy to announce, was one of the most utilized with our group of Zambians, and followed by religious coping, instrumental, self-destruction, which is more avoidant type coping strategies, and substance use. And so, so this sample, if you're kind of curious, I think the average age was 35. And Bella was a very big player when I was collecting this data a few years ago in pulling in a lot of those Zambians that I could pull this sample to kind of give us a bit of a trend on what's going on. So we had a 55% male, and then it was mostly from the South, about 55%, 38% from the West of the US, and then 7% from the Northeast. So now coming back to this active coping, like I mentioned, I think this ties into our conversations today, because in the face of discrimination, in the face of stressors that immigrants experience, what are some things that people are doing on a psychological level to navigate the strategies? And so, which kind of brings us to this idea of our mindset and how that informs our behaviors, informs our feelings, and how we interact with others. And so to kick us off, I will ask everybody if you have a pencil, paper, something, just real quickly, I'm going to play a video here in kind of getting us into this idea of mindset and what we're talking about. And then you can try and gauge where you lie in that sphere. So let me see if I may have to stop share so I can share a video. So I will stop sharing. And then try and find where my other stuff is. Okay, so let's see. So now you get to see what I've been Googling, because I think I'm about to share my full screen here. No judgment. Okay, so here we are. If I can find the video.
I have it up if you want me to play it.
Yeah, okay, because I think I needed to update something. That's I can't share sound. So Cheetah, if you can go ahead and share that, that'd be great.
All right. I think I have to. All right.
Which mindset do you have? Get ready. Score. Read each statement and decide.
Can you all hear okay? All right, perfect.
Whether you mostly agree or disagree. Look to see how many points each answer is worth before the next question comes up. 1. Your intelligence and skills are something very basic about you that you can't change very much. You believe that how smart someone is or skilled in things like art, sports, or business comes naturally. 2. No matter how much intelligence you have, you can always change it quite a bit. You believe that with effort, you could actually change how smart or creative you are. 3. No matter what kind of person you are, you can always change substantially. While everyone is born with different strengths and weaknesses, you believe people can significantly change what kind of person they become. 4. You can learn new things, but you can't really change how intelligent you are. You know that you can improve a little in areas you care about, but at the end of the day, you basically remain at the same level of intelligence and skill as what you started with. 5. You can always change basic things about the kind of person you are. You really believe that you can change parts of who you are. 6. You are a certain kind of person, and there isn't really much that can be done to change that. Some people are funny, others are smart, some are good at sports, and others are natural creatives. People can't really change these natural inborn qualities. Now, add up your points. And click the button with the point range of your score to learn about your results.
All right, that was it. And some early morning math there.
Yes, And I'm guessing people are cheating by like using their something else to calculate. Awesome. Okay. And so thank you for that, Cheetah. And so I was just gonna sum up a bit of what those results would be indicating. So it had like 3 categories there, but the higher score is referencing having a growth mindset. And then the lowest score range is a fixed mindset. And then so in the middle there, you're kind of like leaning on the fence, deciding where you're going. But so the higher the score, the more you're moving towards a growth mindset is how you'd summarize those. And so before we kind of delve into that, so as you look at your scores, but what I want to kind of share first as you think about, your mindset. So this is a set of deeply held ideas, beliefs, and thoughts that you have about the world. So your worldview, as well as about how you see yourself. And this tends to impact or affect how you think, how you feel, how you act, right? It impacts your behaviors, impacts your relationships, how you interact with others. It also impacts how you handle stress and how you make decisions. So it plays a big component. And so it really creates your perception, and perception is reality, because what you perceive is what your reality is. And this is how, even in this conversation we're having, everybody will walk out of here with very different experiences because it's being looked at through your lens, right? And so your mindset is literally born out of your experiences. It starts very early on. As soon as you're born into this world, you're introduced in certain cultures, certain values and beliefs that start to inform how you see the world and how you interpret. So what that means is that your experiences, which are going to be very varied across everybody that we have here. So your experiences and what you learn from those experiences tend to determine, and what you learn from them, determine how you see the world, which means that depending on what you learned and what kind of experiences you're exposed to, there are flaws in the way that we think. There will be flaws in how you think, and some of the mindsets or some of the ways we see things or interpret may actually be deceptive and can lead us to have habits that are detrimental to our own development or detrimental to you being able to achieve the goals or being able to achieve your full potential. And so when we talk about the mindset itself, when you think of a fixed mindset, we're talking about those scores that we're talking about. So the idea behind this is that your character, your intelligence, and your creative ability are predetermined, is what a fixed mindset, the outlook is that I can't really do it. What I have is what I've got, this is how I am. I can't really change much. So which means if you face failure, it's really just an evidence of your inabilities. Whereas a growth mindset looks at that as that's an opportunity for growth. So yes, I have these qualities about myself, but I can continue to develop and grow my capacities, my intelligence, and even change aspects of who I am or my character. And so, so one of the things as you think about this is because we develop a way of seeing the world through experiences, which means a lot of the mindsets we develop are learned. And anything that is learned can be unlearned. And this is where having that shift can be very helpful in our ability to move forward. So just because you have flaws in your thinking, which I can guarantee 100% each of us have elements of that. So nobody in here can walk out saying, I have no flaws in my thinking, because you do not live in a perfect world, right? And so the idea here is thinking that just because you have flaws in your thinking that you have acquired or learned through your environment and your experiences does not mean that you are flawed. And because the way you've developed, your way of seeing the world and the way you've seen yourself was born out of certain experiences at certain points in time that informed that point in time it made sense. At that point in time, that way of thinking, that way of looking at things, that way of interpreting your experience was able to meet a need that was going on in the time. So having those flaws is not problematic. The wisdom is being able to acknowledge and to realize when your form of thinking is no longer serving you well. It's like having a shoe that was fitting you at 10 years old, it was perfect, but your foot keeps growing. You cannot insist on trying to wear that shoe when you're 25 unless you stop growing at 10. And so it's similar to realize, like, yes, the way we see the world was developed for a purpose at a certain point in time, but there are times when that needs to change, when it's no longer effective for us. And so being a clinician and having worked, I've done, I train therapists in my work. Like, I work in the School of Social Work, it's a graduate program. So I'm part of my profession. I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, right? I'm a researcher, and I'm a practitioner. And so I've done individual therapy, I've done couples therapy, I've worked with groups, and I train grad students that are, future therapists in the same arena. So when I think of mindsets, I also think of how this how it manifests when we have a fixed mindset, and how it manifests in relationships, how it can be detrimental in our success in, careers, work, relational, and how that rigidity in our thinking can be detrimental to our progression. And so problems arise in this way of thinking because when we are having a fixed mindset, we're not willing to change, we're not willing to adapt, even when the situations around us are changing. And so then you're likely to give up when you face challenges. You take less control of your own destiny because there's much more this deterministic, things are out of my control, so therefore things happen. Or you're scared of taking risks because failure for you is telling you something. It points to your own inabilities, right? And so it's like a confirmation of your weaknesses per se. And so you don't tend to push yourself. And sometimes people can look inward. Whereas when you struggle, you look inward in ways that are disparaging, you're very self-critical, or you may not take responsibility for things and blame other people. And so there's different ways that people tend to manage that. Either we go inward or we go outward in positive or negative ways. It can go either direction. And so I'm going to try not to kind of go into talk a lot. So hopefully as questions come in, we can touch on some of those aspects and what things can be done. But I think I will pause here. And
Now,
yeah, go ahead, Cheetah.
no, this is it's been great. I think I could listen to you talk about this all day long. I have a whole bunch of questions, and I'm going to try not to ask too many self-therapy questions here, because I feel like I could get into them. What you just said about some of the self-imposed suffering that plays a role in our relationships, and at work, right? Because sometimes when you talk about going inward or outward, I see a lot of people who are frustrated because they can't take ownership, right? Sometimes it's everybody else's fault, especially at work, and there's so much animosity and all kinds of things come to play. So my question to you to start is, how can we challenge, in the moment when we are reacting to an event, how can we kind of baseline, right? Not go into extremes and kind of neutralize some of our learned ways of thinking that aren't helpful, in the workplace or in relationships? How do we stop and say, what is really going on? How do we sift through the truth versus our preconceived notions?
Awesome. That's a great question, Cheetah. And let me know if I kind of veer in a different direction that does not answer your question. So when you're in the middle, how do you catch yourself in some of those instances, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing, especially when it comes to recognizing our frame of thinking, is being able to start cultivating your own, self-awareness. Because you kind of know, like I mentioned, all of us have those aspects, right? And so one thing that we have to know is that our brain is very smart. It's designed to kind of help us be effective. And so it kind of skips certain, if you do something long enough, it'll create neural pathways to automatically go places for you. So you don't have to constantly think about it. This is how you can drive without having to think so much about it. When you first learn how to drive, I know when I was first learning how to drive, I had to think about everything, right? What's my foot doing? And especially learning on a, what are those crash? What do you call the other cars now? It's been a long time because I have automatic.
Manual.
The manual, okay? You have to think through everything. And so similarly, most of us may actually not be aware of a lot of our distorted cognitions, right? Some of the beliefs that we have, because only a certain percentage of our thinking patterns are in our consciousness, which means you have to invest some time in introspecting, in being self-aware about how you're thinking, how do you think, right? Where is it stemming from? And so, so then what that means, Shida, is that if you are aware of some of your own weakness, your weak spots, right? In terms of how you're thinking, because, and I'll give an example here. So if you grew up in a space where you were constantly trodden down, right? Or maybe your caregivers or somebody, like they're always pushing you down. So every time you try to keep up, they tell you you're useless, you never amount to anything. And so that's what you latched on, because every time you try to amount to something, they shut you down. So to be safe in that space, it was easy to just go with the flow of, yes, I suck, right? Then over time, you adopt that frame of thinking. You're not a child anymore, but now you're in your 20s. But over time, you have learned. So every time you're faced with difficult situations, you're automatically thinking, I suck, right? I can never amount to anything. So in that workspace, then when you're faced with any like situations where it may point to your inadequacies, you may be more sensitive to that, right? And may actually go outward, for example, like you're saying. So if you're aware, like, okay, so here's a message. So if you're introspecting and you realize this message, where every time I face challenges, the brain is like, hey, remember that we suck? They're like, oh yeah. So you kind of, that's where you go. So it'll automatically go there because that's where you've always gone, right? So you run away from those kind of situations. So that means in the workspace, like when you run into those situations, if you know where some of those places are for you, it means that when they come up, you can separate yourself from like what is happening in a way that you can be more productive. So instead of reacting, you choose to act in that moment, because you're not just, because most of the time we tend to react without, like, we're not thinking about things, and then you may regret what you do after the fact. So that awareness is going to be key in helping you navigate those situations in a much more productive way when you face, whether it's pushback or lashback or something in that work environment.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that kind of answers what you're trying to get.
Yes, it does. I do have a couple of follow-up questions. One is, you said distorted cognition. Would like you to clarify what that is. But also second, how does somebody, because I think it's hard to, in your own biased mind frame, give a fair evaluation of self. And I'm learning that, like, I think I'm pretty introspective. Every year I sit down and like, where are we? Do a self-assessment. But sitting in front of a therapist has shown me even greater blind spots and deeper rooted, challenges or distortions, if you will. So like, how does somebody with a certain mindset even learn what these distortions are, right? Because it can be hard, because you just yourself, like, I don't know, it's a hard thing to give yourself a fair evaluation, because what kind of bias in that thinking, right? We either may not even think we're too good, or maybe we think we're great, and fail to see our shortcomings. So like, how does somebody go about making a fair assessment of self?
That's a good question, right? Because that's like opening Pandora's box. It's like, I don't know what I'm going to find there. Do I really want to know like what's going on there, right?
Yeah.
And so, so it really, it requires, some practice and really honesty. And I like if you're familiar with like one of the earliest psychologists, Sigmund Freud. One of the things he says, like, being entirely honest with yourself is a good exercise. We may face other people and for different reasons have to put on a face, right? But it's important that when you are, you are honest with yourself. And so part of that, there's certain questions that you can ask, and I'm just going to throw out a few, right? And as you kind of try to get into this habit of introspecting. So each of us really operate by some kind of a rubric. And you may not know what your rubric is. Because like I said, we have created these rules along the way, and most of them are kind of sitting in our unconscious. And whether we are aware of them or not, they continue to drive our behaviors. And this is where the danger lies, is where ignorance, we say ignorance is bliss, but ignorance is not bliss when it comes to your cognitive distortions. And when I'm talking about cognitive distortions, so these are our ways of thinking that we have picked up along the way that may be detrimental for our own growth. So like I said, we may going through like that example that I gave of somebody who may have grown in an environment where this messaging that they were getting, right? that later they tend to, you may internalize. So then at the center of your belief system is that I'm not good enough. So which means when you're confronted with situations and you fail at something, your automatic conclusion comes back to my not being good enough, right? And that is a cognitive distortion. Because that is not accurate. As we were talking about with having a growth mindset, is maybe you're not good at something now, but you have to keep going, right? You're not good yet, but it's going to get better. And so, so then what it means is that you have to kind of think and look at yourself and say, how do I, so why do I think the way I think, right? Because most of the time, the way you operate is interacting with other people. And maybe you're facing problems or people kind of hint, like they keep telling you, hey, And so part of that introspection may require also asking those that are close to you to kind of point out some of those things that they see, which makes you very vulnerable. And most of us don't want to be vulnerable, but there's growth in vulnerability. And so, so you ask why do I think the way that I think? Where are these thoughts coming from? Because half the time we may be carrying messages that are not ours, that somebody implanted in there that are not helpful for us. And so then you're asking yourself, how is this frame of mind, my way of thinking, how does it impact my relationships? And is the way that I see the world working for me? Because most of the time when things are not working, you're going to be running into conflict. You're going to be hitting barriers, or you're going to be hitting things that mean I have to step back and look, what is going on? Is it me? Is it the context, right? So you can be able to separate that out. And then how do I manage, what psychological obstacles do you have? Or like when you're faced with unmet expectations? Because when you run into those blockages is when some of those truths start to come out. Like, how do you handle failure? How do you handle unmet expectations? How do you handle life when it's not working out for you? How do you manage when you're faced with stress? So pressure tends to bring out a lot of our cognitions, and it will bring out our cognitive distortions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to pause for a second to see if there are any audience questions right now. I don't want to take over because I could have a conversation with Dr. Sherinah all day long. So if you have any questions, feel free to come up. I will put Change on the spot because I'll put her on the spot because she said that your work is something she cites. She's in a PhD program as well. You're one of very few. So 2 doctors, Zambian doctors focused on this work. So really proud of that. So Change, this is your opportunity to meet your hero. So if you have questions, please come off mute and ask them. But I wanted to call that out.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Dr. Sherinah. You do such an amazing job. Your work is so important. And yes, I do cite you all the time because I can't find anybody talking about African immigrants in the social sciences and social work. So thank you so much. I guess my question would be, I guess in thinking about fixed mindset, growth mindset, I guess even in your research, you talk about people's backgrounds and you talked about people being lonely and the things that people are going through. And so I guess my question for you is, when we talk about fixed mindset, growth mindset, how much does, I don't know, I guess the context, like the family I come from, or maybe traumas that people have, how much does that affect? Because I think sometimes, whether it's in Zambia or the African diaspora, we don't necessarily always talk about what happened to someone's mom or their auntie or their uncle. So how much does that kind of, our family stories and histories impact our mindset? And what can we do about that?
Thank you for that question, Change. And so yes, that's definitely very important because when we talk about our mindset, like this is something that we start to develop, right? From the day that we're born and we become aware of the environment that we're in, because the way of viewing the world and the way of viewing ourselves is very much informed by the context, right, that we're in and what we're learning through that context. And so, so we develop those beliefs about ourselves, about how to deal with life from the things that are happening, right? Like in our context. And also when you think about some of your own good, God-given disposition or like gifts that you have. And so that is definitely something that is very important, because what you're going through, like I mentioned earlier, each of us have gone through different experiences, which means the lens through which we're seeing things is going to be very different because it's informed by that. And that, I think that's the beauty of life. Like each of us is very unique in that way. And so then what it means is that you have to, and this is where I was talking about opening Pandora's box, because if you've gone through traumas, and with research shows that especially going through trauma at early ages, it does change the wiring of your brain. There's certain things that are happening physiologically that can change how you're seeing things. And the beauty of the brain is that there is neuroplasticity, which means we can change, we can create new pathways. It's easier when we're younger, but you can train an old donkey, right? Like you can train an old donkey. Yes, we can. It may take longer than a younger one because those pathways have been ingrained a lot longer. And so what that means then is that we need to look at our histories and how that informs who we are now, because we are our history, right? The body does keep a score, like everything we're going through, whether we were, it has an impact on us. So it means that we have to, even as you look through, so if there's been traumas or there's been things that are going through your life, it helps to inform. And this makes sense that I see the world this way, because this is where that stemmed from, which is different from if you're just going through life, not thinking that you're having all these issues, but your history makes sense that you are in this certain place at a certain time. It gives you more power at that point to say, okay, I have carried this baggage long enough. It's impacted me this way. Do I keep carrying it, or this is something that I can set down now and kind of move forward? And so, and that is how that awareness and being able to know how your history, your culture, your upbringing plays a part in your worldview can be informative in your path to move forward, because you're carrying that. And if you don't know how it's impacting you, then it gives you less power to know how to change or what needs to change, and then what is yours and what is not yours.
No, that's great. We have a question in the chat about would it be possible if you have a rubric or some kind of outline people can use as a resource to start making that evaluation that you can share with everyone? I think it would be useful. I'm not sure if one exists.
So yeah, yes, because I do have like, so what I have here, let me just kind of indulge here in a little bit for a second. Okay, now I have like a million things open on my, but I would,
well,
yeah. So I do have a rubric, and for some reason, I think I cannot share anything anymore, but anyway.
okay.
Oh, actually I can, but yes, there is something that I have put together that I am very happy to share.
Okay.
That can kind of give some guidance on that.
Okay, yeah, we can send it out to the group after this.
Okay, am I screen right now? I think I did that by accident.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, you are, but no worries. We have a few more questions. So Ruth Marlucy, and then Zenga, I'll take you next. But Ruth, if you want to go ahead and ask your question. Okay, well.
Hi. I'm on the line, but I didn't indicate that I wanted to ask a question.
Oh, okay. I see. I saw a raised hand. So, okay.
Oh,
all right.
sorry.
No worries. No worries.
Thank you.
Zenga, you have a raised hand. I'm hoping you have a question. All right.
I do. I actually do. This is really good information. Thank you, Dr. Saasa. So I think you had, on one of your PowerPoints, you had shared a statistic about how men, African men, where I think it was something to the effect of like we are affected more by like depression and something to that effect. And so with how like, I guess the pandemic happening with us last year and the mental strain that it kind of took on everybody. And I think one of the things that kind of became a buzzword was like mental health and like, you know, getting counseling and getting therapy and things of that nature, right? And so I think you did mention that you do like therapy and counseling and stuff like that. So my question is, do because I think, well, do you get to see Africans, more specifically African men, seeking therapy, right? Is that something that's like over the years? Have you seen like a growth in the number of like African men that are seeking therapy? Because I know like right now I've been looking for like a therapist, and fortunately I'll be changing jobs, and because of my job change, I'm gonna switch to a new healthcare. So I'll move from Kaiser to Cigna, because I think Cigna has more therapists available. And so so one of my friends told me about like this website called Therapy for Black Men, and Cigna was the one that was like, they had like most of the therapists would accept Cigna. But I think it just kind of took me, it kind of got me interested, like, so what percentage of like African men, and even just Africans in general, because I do hear about like Black people in general, but I'm more curious about like us Africans, especially with how we were raised, with how to like, we don't really talk about these things. We don't even believe, just because we have, I guess, life stresses that are too heavy. We think that therapy is like secondary. So like, is that something that you've been exposed to? So yeah, just what are your thoughts on that?
Awesome, thanks for that, Zanga. And I still can't get over, so I went to school at Kasisa Girls with Zanga's big sister. I think I was like grade 8, she was grade 11 going up.
Yes.
I just had a go crush on her. But I remember Zanga's voice, so anyways. But no, your sister was awesome. But anyway, so completely distracted. Anyway, but yeah, so your question is a very interesting question. And I have similar questions I'm still trying to assess. And it's very interesting because I just got a paper, well, actually, I don't know if it's already published online at this point, just recently, because I was curious to see, especially with the numbers that I talked about, typically in the population, like generally you see about, about 10-15% with like depression, anxiety, clinical depression, anxiety in like the general population. And with my research, I'm finding higher rates of those issues within African groups. And then, so with the sample that I did, it was about 24 to 25% for women that were exhibiting anxiety and depressive symptoms in the clinical range, and for men it was 30%. And so, so the study that I'm mentioning, that I'm not sure if it's available online, if it's not, it should be here in a couple of weeks, was looking at service utilization, because I'm a clinician, like I'm a social worker. So I'm just like, when I see a problem, I'm like, what are we doing? Like, is there a solution to this? Are people getting help? Because it's definitely a great need. And so I looked at this study with mental health service utilization among our people, and it's not happening. And so the need is there, but most of are not accessing. And there's different reasons and different barriers at micro, meso, and macro levels, right? Individual, but also looking at our own cultures, right? And stigma around like mental health and just how it's foreign, right? This whole depression, anxiety business is like Western. It's not something that we are very familiar with in our culture. And so, so yes, I have. So being on like a college campus, I'm exposed to a little bit more like of the international student body, but out there in the world, like there's hardly African men, since we're talking about men specifically, that are out there seeking help. And there's different factors that speak to why that is the case. And so the need is there. And I think that's part of the work that we need to do, because people are suffering and they're suffering in silence. And then turning to maybe other ways that are not necessarily helpful for their own growth and journey in trying to navigate and cope with that. And so that's part of what my work is trying to do, is how do we get the help that people need? Because if you're living in this country, we know there's a lot of things that are going on and a lot of barriers. And part of the question that I had in that paper was, why were men struggling a little bit more psychologically than, I mean, both were struggling, but there was more risk for the men. And part of that research shows also that when it comes to the economic and structural exclusion, men were also experiencing more of that than the women were. and it speaks to the US context and just the Black man's experience in this country that kind of plays those dynamics.
So Dr. Saasa, how do we start having honest conversations about this, both here and in Zambia, right? Because in our culture, there are a few local languages that even have a term for depression, right? It's just not in our vocabulary, and you know, language matters, right? If there's no word for it, does it exist? But we know it exists. So like, how do we start having these honest conversations and start normalizing, you know, access, right? Start normalizing. So I really want to thank Zenga for talking about his experience going to counseling, right? And looking for counseling and the challenges of that, especially in our system with like access to healthcare. But in Zambia, right, I think only one hospital has a mental health ward, like on the Copper Belt. And so like, how do we have these conversations and start stripping some of that strict stigma away?
So I think in your question, you have the answer as well there, Cheetah, right? It's about having those conversations and normalizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think especially with the international or the diaspora, right? Because there's a certain expectations that people come into this country as immigrants, and there's definitely expectations from our people at home, right? And so then most of the time people may tend to hide their struggle. And because I'm a clinician, like I just go right into the pain, like let's talk about the pain, because this is what, at the end of the day, this is what life is about. Like you can have all these things, but if you are suffering, you're not really being able to have a wholeness and to be okay. And that's the part that matters. And so being able to sit down and have those conversations, because most of the time you'll find that you're not alone. Because it's in that loneliness, right, where a lot of those problems arise, because if you think you're an anomaly, but when we sit together, and I think that's the biggest thing that we need to recognize, that yes, there's no depression, anxiety in our vocabulary, because we call it different things in our context, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have that, but it's just different. And then when you also look at the way our culture was built in, so like if you were struggling, right, there's a lot of stigma in the cultural context where we are now. Like when somebody who has depression, like, you know, like we may have a certain way to look about it. But if you have somebody at home in that context who, whether they've lost something or their life has taken a different turn and they're struggling, like we don't tend to look at them as weird for their suffering. You know, we may call it, and I was trying to think like even in our own language, whether we're thinking, you know, they in Lozi, right, would say something like bakula pilu, which is really pain of the heart, right? Like we have ways, and so part of that is being able to tap into our own cultural frame of thinking, our own cultural mindset, and what are these things called, and how have we historically dealt with them? And I think that's part of the hardest thing, is because most of our collective way of being in Zambia, like even when I was in college, like I had to chase my roommates out of like, you know, which I hadn't mentioned because I did get my initial associate degree at National College, which is now Mlungushi University. But most of the time you had to like kick out your friends, like I really need to study. So you're always constantly surrounded by a social support system. And like I mentioned, even in my studies, that social support is a very key part in the well-being of African immigrants, which they tend to lose when they get here. And so then part of that conversation, like even just sitting down together and having these conversations. Over here in Utah, I help a nonprofit that is focused on African immigrants and Black immigrants in general in this context. And we've had several groups and things where mental health is a big component. We started doing that, especially last year when you had the whole COVID thing hitting and all the racial discourse, you know, all those things that were going on that people were just overwhelmed. And it's been very helpful for people to come out in the open and just share and like where the resources, and kind of take away that the shame that people tend to attach, because everybody's experiencing this. The difference is people are hiding, and the more they're hiding, the more they're suffering. But the more we see that we're collectively going through this together, because we're not alone, then it's no longer this thing, this stigma, and you can get the help that is necessary. So conversations, bringing it out into the open is part of the healing process for that.
No, I love that. And also the aspect of dealing with it in our own words, right? Like we don't need to force another person's language for it. Let's deal with it based on how we call it. I think I love that, and I can see that going a long way. So we have a number of questions. I'll call on people to come off mute. Ruth, I think you want Violet Mwanza to ask the question that you have. Feel free to come off mute and pose your question.
Thanks, Chita. I was just curious because I've been working with immigrants who are from Tanzania, Zambia, and some that are just all over as international students in Asian countries. And as I've been talking about financial health, I'm noticing that there could also be a correlation between the age of immigration and their ability to integrate or to really find that support system. Are you finding in your research that is that the case, or is it just people, depending on the location they are, it's a lot easier for them to navigate through the challenges of immigration? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Ruth. So, so this is talking about the different generations, right? And some of those variations that may be happening within those groups. And I'm trying to remember at the top of my head, like with a study that I did, if there were any generational differences in who was seeking help or not, which I do not, if I remember correctly, there was no significant differences between the two groups. But in terms of mental health, we had more, I think it was with the men where the first generation was struggling more than the second generation in that aspect. And then there's some other issues where there is flipped with some of the exclusionary experiences where second generation was having more exclusionary experiences when it came to economic and structural. And so I think there's definitely differences between the two groups. And mostly, again, when you talk about second generation, they're adopting, their culture is different from the parents. They're coming in and they're being raised differently, so they can navigate some of the environments a little bit differently. And so with my study, again, I have not found, because I haven't delved into some of those nuances that are different between the two groups, but I know with other research, there's been several differences, but overall, there's still less help seeking, especially within the minority group populations for various factors. But there are some differences in areas between the two groups. And I think that the cultural context speaks to that. So the second generation being more comfortable, like therapy, they start in schools as counselors and things like that is part of the normal process. Whereas for a parent who grew up in Africa may be seeing that a little bit differently. So I don't know if that answers your question, Ruth. So I don't have definitive answers specific to that. But from other research, there are some differences there that drive things differently for first and second generation.
Okay. Thanks, Doctor. I'll call upon our forever president, Bella, to come on and ask his question. Bella, if you're somewhere quiet, and feel free to come off mute.
Hi, Chita. I don't know why you call me the forever president since you're supposed to be replacing me. Dr. Saasa, thank you very much for making time for us, and great to see you again after so many years. So I was intrigued about what you were saying in the beginning about how our brain, it's essentially malleable, and that as we do something over and over, it becomes like second nature. And your example of driving a manual vehicle really helped me connect the dots. But I guess I'm just curious from a layman's point of view, other than just ongoing practice and I guess asking questions from experts, what other methods or strategies can we employ to just help us build those connections?
Awesome. Thank you, Bella. That's a great question, especially when you think about the brain. The brain is a beautiful thing. And consistency is one of the brain's best friend, and that can be for good or for bad, right? Because if you're doing something, I always like to think about it like a path. Since we like hiking here, it's easier to hike a path that's already been trodden several times because you can see where you're going. And so the brain tends to do very similar things. As we are consistently doing something, it creates those neural pathways that become stronger. for us. And so, so then part of that process, as we are thinking about like utilizing the brain, is so if you're finding like, okay, there's this certain habit or this certain thing that I like to do. So if every time you face like a new experience, like you freak out, like we all get, anxious, it's the normal human experience, right? But it can go to a place where it's more detrimental. But what that means is that when you notice certain patterns, like I have this tendency, when I'm faced with like a new thing, I'm like, I shy away because I'm like scared I'm gonna fail. And you kind of learn how to do that. So then every time you face that kind of situation, you automatically go into that place. So what that means is as you start to push yourself beyond that, because I think one of the phrases is that your growth begins at the end of your comfort zone. So it means that as you consistently start to push yourself, you start to challenge your own thinking, right? And so that consistency is what begins to like, so now you're setting a new pathway. So we have this path we've walked on every time we face challenges, we're scared, we think we're gonna fail, so we don't do it. Because somewhere in the back, in their unconscious, we learned a message that says like, we're not gonna be good enough at something. And so that is the pathway that the brain like, yep, this is where we go. It's the same thing, right? Every time you're stressed, you eat ice cream. Next time you find yourself eating ice cream before you even realize how stressed you are. Like you're just like, man, oh yeah, why am I eating so much ice cream? Oh yeah, this thing happened, I'm so stressed out. So the brain is like, it's quick like that. Like it just learns, okay, this is how we do things. So to just keep doing things for you in the background. And so then that consistency means that as you start to do that, that path you used to take, you're not walking on that anymore. The grass is going to start growing on it, right? Because now you're creating a new pathway. And then soon enough, once you continue that repetition is what starts to create those different pathways. And this is how we grow our brain, by creating those neural pathways through repetition. By default, when you're not paying attention, your brain will try to take you back to the thing. But once you start walking that other pathway, the grass has grown, you can't even tell where that path used to be, then you have created a new habit. And hopefully this is one that you like at that point. So I don't know if that answers your question, Bella.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
At this moment, I'd like to pause for a second and recognize a very special guest that we have. His Excellency, Ambassador to the United Nations, Dr. Ngosa Simbiakula, is on the call with us. Really excited to have him. So, hello, Doctor. I'm not sure if you want to come on and say a few remarks, but wanted to make sure that we recognize your presence. All right, didn't mean to put him on the spot, but he is here. And again, we are very honored that he's in our presence. So I know we're almost on the hour, but I know that there've been a lot of questions. So I'd like to pause and see if Dr. Saasa, if it's okay with you to take one or two more questions before we close it out. Any other questions, guys? This is your chance. Chungu, do you have any questions? I know you put some in the chat. I want to make sure that I got all your. Chungu, do you want to come off mute? Okay, that's fine. We, Dr. Saasa, again, thank you for the time. I do want to kind of be explicit. I think our quiz was, do we have a fixed mindset or growth mindset? I want to kind of, I guess, explicitly say that from this conversation, what I've learned is there's almost nothing we can't work on or change, that we all are in growth mode. So if like you scored lower on that and have a fixed mindset, I challenge everyone to think of ways that they can create new paths, right, to exercise and just grow their well-being and hopefully improve the quality of our lives and probably achieve more successes. I think Dr. Saasa's comment about, what kind of mindset you have based on how many roadblocks you face, if you're always in conflict, if things aren't just going your way, challenge your way of thinking and your perspective on the world. I think that's very powerful. Manema, I see that you have one last question. You will close us out, so no pressure. You can come off mute and ask your question. And by the way, Manema is a charge nurse. I saw that she got that promotion. So congratulations, Manema, on that new role. And thanks for being with us today.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, I joined the chat a little late, so I'm not sure all the details that were discussed or not, but just in case certain things were not discussed, I think I agree with the fact that where we come from, mental illness comes with a stigma, which causes a lot of people to shy away. And to be honest with you, I think this is a very serious situation in our community concerning Zambians. And I think maybe I would suggest, like, if we had like maybe a function specifically targeting mental illness to kind of just bring everybody together the way they have like the Independence Party, and have like really actual Zambians come out and tell their story, because we could have meetings like this, but then unless we get hands-on and have that conversation that a lot of people don't want to have, it's not going to make a difference. Even just like actual things like funding for like maybe women or men, or where there's all these other issues that come into play concerning even just substance abuse, maybe domestic violence and all those things, because those are things that a lot of people run away from, and we judge each other so much that we're hurting our own people, and people are actually losing children, people are losing husbands, people are losing wives. And I think we really, really need to try and really get it out there, because I think this issue of mental illness in our Zambian community abroad is something that is much, much bigger than what we think.
Mm.
So yes, I definitely agree. Is it Ms. Manema? That it definitely is like with a lot of the work that I'm doing, it is very concerning. It's a very big problem that I'm hoping like with this continual kind of bringing it into the light again, because there's not a lot of work that has been done for this particular population, but there's so many factors that definitely increase the vulnerability for having negative mental health outcomes in the context that we are. And so anything that can be done in bringing that issue to light, but also creating the right support system so people are able to thrive is very, very important in this particular space.
No, I think there's a lot of community leaders on this call, and mental health practitioners and just healthcare providers that I hope by hearing the call to action, I know from conversations with some of you that this is something you're thinking of. So I think that there's definitely the need, and we've seen it here in Atlanta recently. Some really bad situations have happened, but some of the things that we don't hear about are just as important. So I hope people hear that call to action from Manema. So thank you for that. And again, these conversations are moving us forward, but as you said, we can do more, and we have the right people and the right stuff to do more. So let's get to it. On that note,
sorry, before you wrap us up, can I have under 5 minutes? Dr. Frida had we didn't chat before you came back on board. Just wanted to share something with the group, if you don't mind, before we wrap up.
Absolutely.
Okay,
a former president. You don't have to ask.
Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I will share a screen here with a few resources, because I usually like to, leave people with at least some places to turn to get a bit more information as we kind of try to navigate. So I think somebody else is sharing, so I can't share, right?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Sorry, Bill. I'll take first dibs. And so this way, people can just like take, let's see if I can take a screenshot, I think. So I'm going to pull back on that. I have multiple things here to share sound. But this kind of gives you a little bit of some resources. I don't think we went over here. But yeah, if you want to take a screenshot of that, but this will require some explanation, but definitely some things that we can do in terms of trying to foster a growth mindset. But here's one, you can just take a picture of this. These are different books, some resources that can be helpful, especially as you think about how, so the author, the researcher that first coined the growth mindset, Carol Dweck, that's her book, and it's really great in trying to help you give some of those strategies and how you can foster a growth mindset. And I also have this other one that is nonsense, right? The power of not knowing. And this also touches on one of the skills that we need in trying to foster a growth mindset. And this is part of being comfortable with ambiguity, because most of the time we want answers, and if we're not certain, so how can we be comfortable with the uncomfortable? Or how can we be uncomfortable without definites, right? And so this is another book that is helpful in helping us be able to start developing that cognitive flexibility in dealing with ambiguity. Then the other one, cognitive behavior therapy, is a very big component that we use in therapy because it works specifically with cognitions, and especially anxiety. Anxiety is a disorder of cognition. It's tied a lot in how we're thinking and how we're framing and interpreting our experiences that can exacerbate how we see the world. So if you want to just take a picture of those, and those can be very good resources as you try to figure out how to navigate growth mindset and how to foster your own resilience, because resilience is a process. It's not something you're just born with. It's something that you can continue to foster and develop. So hopefully those resources can be helpful for some as you continue to find ways to improve. So I think that was it. Hopefully I didn't cut it too soon. Okay, so now, thank you, Chida.
Bella, it's your chance now. Over to you.
Okay. No, thank you, Dr. Saasa. So thank you for allowing me to steal a few minutes of your schedule. So we wanted to highlight this event that we have coming up in August in Las Vegas. It's called the 2021 Inaugural Zambia-US Business Conference. And this is an event that's being hosted by various stakeholders within the US, specifically the Zambian Association Network of the US, which is composed of various local Zambian associations, and also the clergy that have also come together to help us host this event. So the primary purpose of this event is to essentially build a bridge between the US and Zambia in terms of relationships that can help us invest back home, but also not forgetting that we live in the world's largest economy here in the US. It's like really exploring the investment opportunities that are available to us as Zambians right here within the US. But at the same time, how do we tap into those opportunities? So case in point, like how does our personal financial literacy affect our ability to manage our own businesses? Because there's a correlation between those two elements. And at the same time, what we want to do is highlight the need for Zambians to have a place where we can call home. Case in point, like here in Atlanta, we have the Eritrean community. They have their own community center where they congregate and they're able to preserve their culture. They're able to share knowledge and best practices to help them thrive in the US. So even for us as Zambians, we're thinking it could be good for us to have places that we can call home. So essentially like a community development center where we can go and learn about our culture, how we can preserve it, where we can learn about how to invest in the US and also investing back home. Case in point, like here in Atlanta, I hear a lot of young people, they want to get married, but they want to get married in the Zambian way or Zambian custom, but they don't know where to go to get that guidance in terms of how do I propose to this young girl that I'm dating using our cultural norms. So those are things that we want to preserve, that as we stay longer in the US, we want to have a place where people can go and learn about our unique culture and keep those traditions going. So the event, as I said, is a business conference, but it also has a gala. So the website is zusbc.com. So that's where you go to learn more about the event. And for today, we are running a special actually. So it's $150 for both the business conference and the evening gala. So if you buy your ticket today, you get that $50 discount that we are promoting. Let me quickly go to our speakers for the event. So we all know this inspiring lady. She's the chief of staff with Anthem National Accounts. So she's a highly accomplished executive. We all look up to her because she's focused, and we can't think of any other. Oh yeah, we can't think of any other Zambian really that has done as much as she has. I know she keeps it humble, but we all look up to her and the great stuff that she's been able to accomplish. So we were under a lot of pressure for Atlanta to have her as our keynote speaker. So we're glad that Dr. Frida has agreed to be our keynote speaker for this event. So we're looking forward to hearing her message. So we also have Mr. Jimmy Katuta. He's based in Las Vegas. In case you haven't heard of him, he also keeps a low profile. So we're trying to flush out all these Zambians that are doing great stuff. But he's also an accomplished business individual, business professional out in Las Vegas. He's also lived in California. So he invests in very high risk businesses, but he's had great success in that. So we're hoping that he can speak to risk taking as a business owner. Like, what does it take really to run a business here in the US, and the value of taking risk. So as I said, he has done a lot, and he's very heavy in promoting Zambia as an investment destination, in addition to other African countries, specifically Uganda. And then we also have Mr. Jonas Abra. He's the executive officer for the Eritrean American Community Center of Georgia. So for those who are familiar with Georgia, around Stone Mountain, there's a Eritrean Community Center. So we're hoping that he can come to this. I mean, he's going to come to this event, of course, and talk about how the Eritrean community was able to acquire their own community center. I was visiting with him yesterday, and he was just narrating to me that they paid about $600,000 for their building, but now it's worth about $3 million. So we're curious to learn, like, how do they go about encouraging their community and the outside community to support them in terms of acquiring this building? Because what he said, it's been a life-changing acquisition for them, because it allows them to have a place where their community members can go congregate and have the support that they need. So with having that center, they're able to tap into many resources in the country. We also have another speaker, but her profile is going to probably be up by later today. Her name is Sarah Kasepa. She's a young Zambian based in Seattle. She's from Kitwe. So she just graduated from Harvard University last year. So she's going to also speak about her journey from Kitwe to Harvard University and finally to Microsoft. So we're being purposeful in the speakers that we are selecting because we want it to be aligned to the theme of the event that we are having, which is promoting excellence to achieve a thriving community. So we believe that these speakers that we are lining up definitely have what it takes to succeed in this country that we have adopted as home, but also back home. Just a quick overview, and I'll close it out. Is just like an overview of the schedule that we have for Saturday. So of course, 8:15, we'll have the check-in process, 9 a.m., the welcome remarks, and we'll have various plenary sessions that we're going to host. So various topics will be held, and various speakers will also come and speak. And then we have breakout sessions. So you can think of this breakout sessions more like a masterclass. So let's say what's a good example? Let's say you're an expert in financial literacy, or let's say mental health. You can have a breakout session where you talk about that unique topic that you're an expert in, and have our participants learn from that opportunity that you are speaking of. Then of course, we'll continue with more plenary sessions. And since Chita continues calling me the forever president, Chita, you'll be our networking lunch MC. So it's enjoy as a payment for that. Then of course, we also have, so if you have a nonprofit, you have a business, we do have vendor sessions where you can come and highlight the great work that you're doing as a nonprofit or a for-profit entity. Then of course, we'll have final breakout sessions, plenary speakers in the afternoon, closing remarks. And of course, we'll have the gala where Dr. Frida will feature as the keynote speaker in the evening. And we also have entertainment from our none other than, what's his name? DJ Flowkid. He's a well-renowned DJ here in the US. And we also have two Zambian artists that are also coming to perform. And let me just quickly scroll down to where they are. Yeah, so this is the entertainment lineup that we have for the evening.
Ooh, yes, Nalu. I'm excited about that one.
So it's good that Chita has agreed to come and introduce Nalu to the stage. So that's what we have in terms of planned for the event. So again, if you're gonna book your hotel, there's a discount if you book through the website. There's a group discount that's being extended to us. It's $34 for those who are arriving on Thursday, then I believe $99 for those that come the day after, beginning on Friday. Hopefully nobody's trying to arrive on Saturday, but if you check in on Friday, it's $99. And that's pretty much all of it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. The contact details are at the bottom of our website. Again, as I said, we are running a special today for those who purchase their tickets. It's $150 versus $200. And then of course, that includes the conference itself and the gala. So it's a great time for everybody to network. And this is the planning team. As I said, it's a representation of various Zambian Association presidents. We have Mr. Fred from Dallas, Ms. Nasalele from Indiana, Jimmy from Las Vegas, Pastor Nathan representing the clergy, but also Zambia Blog Talk Radio, Dr. Scott, Pastor Allen, myself, Ms. Stella Banda from Pennsylvania, Evangelist Dr. Margaret from Dallas, Nelly, and of course, Madam Joyce Chibwe are also part of the planning team. But we are open to getting more people on board. So if you want to be a part of this event and just helping planning it out, please reach out and we can definitely incorporate you, because we're looking for various ideas to make this event a great success. So Madam Chita, thanks for giving me a few minutes to run a quick spiel about what we're planning, and we're looking forward to seeing most of you there. And thank you, Dr. Frida, for giving us a platform to also talk about the event.
All right, thanks, Bella. But again, thank you, everyone. Frida, do you want to close us out with a few remarks? You're on mute. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sheeta, for a great job. And Dr. Sherinah, thank you so much for sharing with us and helping us really think about transitioning from our fixed mindsets to growth mindsets. I think what I heard as a common theme is that even before you can get to growth mindset, you have to have metacognition in terms of how you think and being able to really address any challenges or derailers that are associated with mental health. I think that as we continue having dialogue and we increase awareness that it isn't a stigma, it is something that we need to destigmatize, because all of us have that mental health element of being able to understand who we are as people. And I really want to thank all of you that have taken time out of your Saturday morning, afternoon, or evening to be with us today, because it is only through these mediums that we can have conversations and we can really begin to make a difference for our country. You know, this topic that we had today was really because we always hear about how we as Africans or we as Zambians have to change our mindset. Oh, their mindset is off, right? And it's made it very important for me to really start delving deeper into the brain and everything that Dr. Sherinah spoke about. And she put up this book, but this book is something that I've read a couple of times because it anchors me. I did not always have a growth mindset. I came here from Zambia pretty flawed with the fixed mindset about what I could do and what I couldn't do. I remember when I was in third grade, my mom only went to like grade 9, I think, but she always had a growth mindset and she pushed and she challenged us to think outside of our norm. And the saying that Dr. Sherinah shared with us, that growth only begins at the end of your comfort zone. And how do you become comfortable being uncomfortable is something that we all have to embrace. So my message to all of you is become lifelong learners. think about how you think about other people and how they can also benefit from this conversation. As ZLA, we really promote and want us all to be successful. And coming back to this is success, but coming back to the fundamentals as well. So with that said, I know we've kept you way beyond 12 or 18 hours, is it? But again, God bless you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much. And we look forward to any suggestions for our next Brunch and Learn, which will be on the 3rd Saturday. So God bless you all. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day, guys.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for being part of today's event.